to the Talent Optimization Podcast, the go-to podcast for CEOs and HR professionals wanting to bridge the gap between the strategy and tactical implementation of talent optimization within their organizations. Through interviews, predictive index, and personal experience, your host, Traci Scherck, helps you discover the facets of talent optimization from both a CEO and HR perspective to truly create the dream team for your organization. Are you ready? Let's get started.
Welcome to the Talent Optimization Podcast. My name is Traci Scherck, and I'm the Chief Talent Officer here at Elevated Talent Consulting. And welcome to December of 2021. We have been on a bit of a journey over the last couple of years. And one of the things that we love to do in our business every December is really to reflect on what that year has been and specifically what that growth is. And it's not just in business, but it's also personally and what is going on, right? So I was sitting in the bleachers last night watching a wrestling scrimmage. And I have to tell you, I have never watched wrestling before. And so for those of you listeners out there that watch wrestling, I could use some support here. I have no idea what I'm watching. But as I'm watching this, I'm watching my son E as he's wrestling. He's been in this for a whole 2 weeks. This is, a sport that we've just never known about or really been involved in. And just the strength and the determination and seeing how far he has come really since August, when he really got into and made up his mind that he was going to pursue something. He said to us, "Hey, Mom, I want to really be involved in sports. I'm not really sure what that looks like." He had swam in the past, and the school that we go to doesn't offer swimming. And unfortunately, they can't do it at the other local schools. So with that being said, the kid is hitting the weight room every morning at 5:15. So yes, I'm up at 5:15 taking him to school, right? But this reflection is so important because I'm seeing the strength and the determination that he has and the plan that he's made to get up and do it. Now, the lesson that I had for him, or the agreement that we had for 5:15 weightlifting, was I must have coffee in my cup, right? Like I must have that coffee in my cup in order to, get out of bed to take you to weightlifting at 5:15 in the morning. And the kid has done it, and it's amazing. And so I will segue back into kind of how we reflect on our year and what that looks like. But I wanted to share that with you because sometimes it's hard for us to see our own progress for us personally when we reflect on how we're doing or what our personal growth is, but it's really easy to see it in someone else. So I just wanted to name that because that reflection becomes incredibly important. So as we chat today, we're going to talk about reflection, what that process of reflection is. And then the next couple of weeks are going to be really fun because next week we will chat with Damon Clark. And Damon is a consultant that actually worked with our team on reflecting on our previous year as a team and as individuals, then, how we went through and planned strategically how we best serve our clients. And do we have the right talent to do that? And then the third week of December, we will actually walk through with you some of that specific planning as an organization and as a team. So with that, thank you so much for being here. So as we talk about reflection, and I reflect on our organization, Elevated Talent Consulting, and my personal growth over 2021, one of those things for me that has been the most fulfilling for me is I've gone and taken classes to get my coaching certification through the International Coaching Federation, through ICF. And here's the thing with coaching. Coaching is the most useful reflection, involves the conscious consideration and analysis of beliefs and actions for the purpose of learning. And this is a quote from an HBR article by Jennifer Porter. And, that's something that's so important, is so often we don't want to reflect on what's been going on because we see those things that are great, but we also see some of those things that are, those ugly truths about ourselves. And then we look at that and go, okay, well, do I want to play with that or don't I, right? Like it's always a conscious choice. But, one of the things that I hear so often with the clients that we're working with is, well, Traci, tell me why this is important. Tell me what the business case for this is and the ROI. And so there was research done by a number of call centers. So this is Bradley Stratz, and call centers demonstrated that employees who spent 15 minutes at the end of the day reflecting about lessons learned performed 23% better after 10 days than those who did not reflect. So what exactly does reflection require, right? Reflection requires us to slow down. It requires us to adopt a mindset of not knowing and curiosity. We need to really understand that this is messy and it sometimes feels really inefficient, right? But it is our responsibility to take that personal responsibility for what we're specifically doing it, because it can give us really valuable insights and key breakthroughs into what's working or what's not working. One of the things that we really look at here at Elevated Talent Consulting is we believe every individual has a right and a choice to be fulfilled in the work that they do. And one of those key questions that I ask myself and that I ask my team is, what has you fulfilled in your work? And we have a standing team meeting every week, and we're starting with and we're asking those key questions. What has you fulfilled in your work? And that reflection comes out to say, so often it's the negative things that come out first, right? Because what we know is that we have over 50,000 thoughts per day, and most of those thoughts are negative. And 90% of those thoughts are just repeats from the day before. And that was research done by Wood. So when we specifically look at those thoughts that we have, and when we're reflecting on them, we have a choice in what thoughts we choose to grab onto and have that impact those feelings that we have, right? So one of the mentors that I've had in my life is Brooke Castillo, and Brooke has a thought model. And her thought model is essentially, hey, there's a circumstance, right? Those circumstances happen all the time. We may or may not be able to control those circumstances, right? And I like to say, hey, we need to be the board. And when we are the board, essentially that is that we are responsible for everything that happens in our life. So there's a circumstance that happens, great. I'm just going to, accept that this thing happened, because if I fight it, I'm just creating more drama, right? So I'm going to accept that this thing happened. And then I am going to have a thought about it. I'm going to have lots of thoughts about that, right? And those thoughts that I have about that thing are going to create certain feelings. Those feelings are going to create actions, and those actions are going to create results. So this is the thought model that Brooke Castillo uses and teaches. So again, there are circumstances, those circumstances create feelings, those feelings create actions, those actions create results, right? And with that being said, those thoughts, every thought you have impacts the feeling that you have. So if you look at that and say, hey, you know what? Yesterday, there were 72 different things that happened. There was a number of different interruptions. I can look at that and say, oh my gosh, yesterday was a really crappy day, right? The feeling that I have then is either crappy, it could be anxiousness, it could be overwhelm. And that feeling is going to drive those actions that I take. And those actions that I take may be that I scroll on Facebook, right? Those actions that I take may be, all right, I'm going to create a plan to get these things done. But I'm not going to create a plan to get those things done based on that specific thought, right? So I need to choose a different thought. So if the circumstances, I had 87 interruptions, the thought is, wow, I may need to create stronger boundaries for what I need to protect my time to get some of those key things done. And that is going to create a feeling of ownership, of empowerment, of, you know what, I can absolutely get this done. I just have to create the plan for it. And then that creates the action of I go and do it. And the result is that those things that I wanted to get done will absolutely get done, right? So those thoughts that we have a huge impact on the results that we get. So as I circle back around to reflection, which is what we're talking about today, and as we reflect on that work that we're doing and that work that we did over the last year, and if we were fulfilled in it or not, really thinking about, what thoughts was I having about that? And even, consciously making those thoughts aware in your head as you're reflecting. in knowing that it is always a choice. Life is not happening to you, right? That's a thought. Life is happening to you or life is happening for you. Both of those are thoughts. It is up to us to decide which thought we're going to grab and use, right? And I choose to grab the thought that says life is happening for me. And I can absolutely create that life that I want today. And I can create those results in my business and for my clients. If I believe that, I know that I'm halfway there. Now, the reflection on this is looking back at what were our actual results, because your results are always going to be a direct reflection of the thoughts that you were having. So did you meet your results? If you didn't meet the results that you had looked for over the last year, why didn't you meet them? And what were those results that you did meet? And ensuring that we're celebrating those. Because when we go through this reflection exercise, what I see so often happens with my coaching clients and our consulting clients here at Elevated Talent is that we focus on the negative. And when we start to focus on the negative, we don't create that plan forward. And here's the trick. It is incredibly important to acknowledge what didn't work well, and then to determine, how do I want to think about that negative result so that I can get a different result next time? Because if we don't consciously choose a different thought, we're not going to move towards that. One of the other things that, Jennifer Porter had stated, and I love this, is that as leaders, we have a bias towards action. And the example that she used is that soccer goalies who stay in the center of the goal have a 33% chance of stopping the goal. Yet, only 6% of goalies stay in the center of the goal. And why is that? And the reason why that is because they feel like they need to be doing something. And as leaders and as employees and staff, et cetera, in our organizations, so often we feel like we have to be doing something. So we're just doing. But the question is, are you hitting your business results? Are you hitting those results that you set out to hit? And if you're not hitting those results, you're spinning your wheels and you're probably overwhelmed, and that's creating anxiety and all the other things, right? There's been so much conversation over the last 2 years about mental health and how we support mental health in the workplace. And it's an absolutely needed topic. And with that, as we reflect back, think about those thoughts you're having. And are the thoughts you are personally having impacting your mental health? The answer is yes. Right? So how do you create that so that you can move forward? So how do we do this reflection thing, right? We've talked a lot about it. We've talked about thoughts. And I will tell you right now, I'm just going to pause a second and say, there's already been a ton of content in this episode that you may need to go back and listen to this one a couple times, take some notes on it. Inside of our Talent Optimization Foundation program, we do webinars. We will be doing a webinar with this specific content that goes into it a little bit deeper, and how to get into that will be in the show notes for you. So as you go into how do you actually do that reflection, right? So let me just name specifically what that is. So the power of reflecting on what you've accomplished prior to planning to see where things went. So that is the importance of reflecting before we plan. So we want to know what we accomplished, and we want to know what are we going to do different next time. Here's the thing. Our thoughts play a huge role in how we see ourselves and what that looks like in our organizations and home lives as well. And that is a quote directly from Jennifer Porter. And I love that because it's tying in those thoughts that we have. And we talked quite a bit about thoughts already at the beginning of this episode. So those thoughts we have a direct reflection on how we reflect and what we see as an accomplishment or not. So again, we have 50,000 thoughts a day. Guess what? More than half of them are going to be negative because life's 50-50, right? And 90% of them are repeats from the day before. Do we want to keep repeating the old thought patterns that don't serve us? The answer is no. So we really need to be aware of what those are so that we can understand ourselves and have the motivation to learn what our values are so that we're not giving that power away, but we are creating that fulfilling life for ourselves. And guess what? No one else can create that fulfilling life for you. You've got to do it yourself. Yes, as leaders inside of organizations, we will absolutely create the container for every individual to be fulfilled in their work and meet the business outcomes. But we can't give from an empty cup. And so with that being said, this reflection piece is really going to allow us to see what went well over the past year, what didn't go well, and what the heck do we want to do about it? So we're not on autopilot in making the same decisions over and over again based on the same thoughts that aren't serving us, our organization, and the individuals that work with us, for us, and that we serve. So as we go into kind of the third part of our conversation today, which is I'm going to give you some questions to reflect on, I really want you to understand that there's a right way and there's a wrong way to do reflection, right? So to help stay on the right path with your self-reflection, I want you to consider asking more what questions rather than why questions. Because why questions can highlight our limitation and stir up negative emotion, while what questions help to keep us curious and positive about the future. And this was research done by Scherck. So there's 3 questions that I really have for you. And I'm going to name that these are all about fulfillment, because what we believe is every individual has a right and a choice to be fulfilled in the work that they do. So this first question is, am I fulfilled in my work? And I was having a conversation with a client yesterday about, are you fulfilled in your work? And the answer was no. And when I dug in deeper, why aren't you fulfilled in your work? The answer that she, gave back to me was because all the things with all these other people around me. And I said, you know what? I'm curious. What do you have control over? So are you fulfilled in your work? The answer was no. Is what do you have control over? Here's the thing. If you're going to choose to make a decision to leave something, make sure you're going towards something versus running away from something. So are you fulfilled in your work? If the answer to that question is no, figure out how you can create that fulfillment in your work. And then you can still make a different decision. But know what that is first, because guess what? You always bring yourself with you, right? So the second question that I have for you is, what created the fulfillment that I do have in my work and in my life? And by the way, you can swap out work for life in any of these questions, right? So what fulfillment do you have? Again, we know that there's 50,000 thoughts that go through our head on a daily basis. More than half of them are negative. If we don't naturally pull out and consciously choose to look at those positive things, and not Pollyanna positive, right? But if we don't naturally choose to pull out and look at those positive things, we will be creating a situation where we're specifically only seeing the negative. So it's really important to consciously choose that. We're absolutely going to look at what those negative thoughts are because they're going to give us really important information. But we want to look at what those positive ones are. Then we want to choose consciously, what are we going to do with the things that didn't work so that we can create a plan and choose if we even want to focus on it, right? So I'm going to repeat our questions so that you have them all together. So the first question is am I fulfilled in my work life? Either one and both. Second question is, what created the fulfillment that I do have in my work and or life? And then the third question is, what would I change with a time turner, right? Like if you had the ability to go back in time to any point throughout 2021, what would you change to create more fulfillment in this last year? So what would you change in order to do that? Notice that that's just another way of saying, hey, what are the negative things? But I've turned that into, how do we positively look at this so we can have the motivation to move that thing forward? And then a bonus question. And that is, what don't I know that would create more fulfillment in my life? Right? So what don't you know? And guess what? There is a ton that we don't know. But yet when we put on this expert hat or when we step into those leadership roles, sometimes we feel like we have to know it all, and we absolutely don't. You know, the biggest key when we look at how do we optimize talent inside of our organization is hire people that their strength is your weakness, right? And then figure out how to collaborate together on that so that you are executing those key strategies in really beautiful and magnificent ways to hit those business outcomes. And we're going to talk so much more about that next week when we bring Damon on. So with that being said, we always end our podcast with what's one key takeaway for our CEOs. And that is to create the time to reflect for yourself as a person. What went well in 2021 for you personally, and what went well in 2021 for you as an organization? Get some help with this. Hiring a coach is something that will allow you to do this incredibly, incredibly well, because they're that thought partner that can allow your thoughts to become outside of your head versus in it, where it's running the same story over and over and over again, and to really create that space so that you can see it. So what's one key actionable takeaway for our HR listeners is take a step back and look at what fulfillment means to you. Celebrate those successes that have happened over the last year. Guess what? This has not been an easy year for HR professionals at all. But reflect on what those great things are. And remember, you can't give from an empty cup. You've got to fill up yourself first. So with that being said, I am so thrilled that you joined us today in our conversation about reflection. I trust that you are going to take some time over this next week to reflect personally for yourself. Those questions will be in the show notes as well. And if you are interested in the webinar that we're doing on this, it'll be inside our Talent Optimization Foundation program, which you can also find in the show notes, along with our coaching program. So thank you so much for joining us. We hope that you have a fantastic day and an amazing end to 2021 that has you fulfilled and excited for what 2022 will bring. Thank you so much and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Talent Optimization Podcast. You'll find more tools and resources for CEOs and HR professionals looking to bridge the strategies versus implementation gap of talent optimization at elevatedtalentconsulting.com. We've also created a free, valuable resource for you to begin bridging the gap called the Talent Optimization Foundation Membership Program. You can access it for free at elevatedtalentconsulting.com/foundation. Be sure to tune in next week for another episode to learn more about talent optimization and creating a dream team for your organization.